Evelyn kissed a stranger, just as her ex lifted the papers meant to destroy her career. Grant immediately accused her of leaking confidential port terms, and every nearby phone turned toward them. With the ballroom orchestra pounding behind her, Evelyn took the complaint from his hand and traced the authority clause line by line. The numbering belonged to an internal draft she had never been sent. One donor lowered his phone. Grant went pale. Then two armed guards addressed the stranger as Luca Serrano. The kiss had made her look even guiltier, and the labor agreement locked at midnight. Evelyn kissed a stranger, just as her ex lifted the papers. It meant to destroy her career. Grant immediately accused her of leaking confidential port terms, and every nearby phone turned toward them. With the ballroom orchestra pounding behind her, Evelyn took the complaint from his hand and traced the authority clause line by line. The numbering belonged to an internal draft she had never been sent. One donor lowered his phone. Grant went pale. Then two armed guards addressed the stranger as Luca Serrano. The kiss had made her look even guiltier, and the labor agreement locked at midnight. Evelyn released Luca's lapel, but she did not retreat. Her lipstick marked the edge of his mouth. His hand remained at her waist for one beat longer than necessary. Not holding her there, simply keeping the crowd from closing around her. Grant recovered first. "Perfect," he said, raising his voice toward the phones. "She gets caught leaking Serrano material. And 5 minutes later, she's wrapped around Serrano himself." Evelyn ignored the heat crawling over her face. She looked down at the complaint again. Page 4 cited a buried authority clause using the phrase emergency authority transfer. That language had appeared only in a short-lived restricted draft. Evelyn had reviewed every version formally delivered to Hart Labor Council. None had contained that numbering. "Where did you get this?" she asked. Grant gave her the smile he used in depositions when he thought a witness had already lost. "The ethics board received supporting evidence this afternoon." "That isn't what I asked." The nearest camera shifted closer. Evelyn turned the complaint 90 degrees beneath the chandelier light. A faint gray footer marked it as a restricted review draft. Her pulse slowed. The union had received that version behind closed doors. Her firm had received only the final version after the disputed clause was rewritten. Grant should not have known which version she had seen unless someone had given him access to the distribution chain. She tapped the footer with one fingernail. "You're accusing me of leaking a document my office never possessed." A murmur moved through the cluster of donors. Grant's smile vanished for half a second. Then he held out his hand. "Give me the complaint." Evelyn folded it once and kept it. "You served it publicly. It's mine now." One of Luca's guards stepped forward. Grant stopped moving. Luca had said nothing since the kiss. That silence now felt more dangerous than Grant's accusation. Evelyn finally looked at him properly. Dull, dark hair swept back from a hard, composed face. Tattoos reached above the collar of his black shirt. His gray suit was cut with the kind of precision Evelyn associated with men whose invoices never listed actual prices. He glanced from her to the complaint. "You know contract versions by sight?" he asked. "By structure. And that structure is wrong. For the story he's telling..." "Yes." Grant laughed too quickly. "She represents the union negotiating with your company. Of course, she knows how to manufacture doubt." Luca's attention shifted to him. "You seem very interested in what I believe." Grant swallowed. Evelyn caught it. So did Luca. The ballroom orchestra reached the end of a song. Applause broke out behind them. Absurdly polite against the confrontation in the corridor. Evelyn heard her name, whispered from the ballroom entrance. She knew what would happen next. The ethics complaint would hit professional circles before dessert. By morning, every client who depended on her discretion would wonder whether she had traded protected labor language to a criminal enterprise. By noon, Grant would not need to prove anything. Suspicion would do the work for him. There's a ratification deadline, Luca said. Evelyn turned to him. Midnight in 10 days. And if it fails, the terminal concession can invoke emergency financing provisions. Grant looked toward the ballroom. Evelyn saw the reaction before he could bury it. Tiny. Immediate. Recognition. She kept her voice level. Those provisions favor North Atlantic infrastructure. Grant looked back at her. You're reaching. Maybe. She took out her phone. Then you won't mind if I call the Union Records office and verify which version was distributed. Grant's expression hardened. You're under an ethics complaint. Contacting custodians after notice could be construed as interference. There it was. Not denial. A barrier. Luca watched him with a colder interest. Now, Evelyn opened the document management app used by her firm. Her thumb moved through the secure index. Only the final version appeared in her receipt history. She held the screen where both men could see it. My office logged the final version the morning after the restricted one was withdrawn. Grant leaned closer. A missing entry proves nothing. Records can be deleted. Evelyn almost smiled. Not that one. Her firm's intake register was mirrored nightly to an outside compliance server because 3 years earlier, Grant himself had insisted the practice needed stronger audit protection. His own precaution had just become her first defense. Grant knew it. Color drained from his face. Luca noticed. What does she mean? Grant straightened. I mean, this is theater. No, Evelyn said. This is version control. She looked at Luca, and somebody is betting that no one here understands it. One of his guards murmured something close to Luca's ear. Luca's expression changed only in focus. He reached into his jacket and removed a phone. My counsel just confirmed North Atlantic filed an emergency readiness notice this afternoon. Grant's head turned sharply. Too sharply. Evelyn saw Luca register that too. The complaint. The timing. The concession clause. Grant's reaction. None of it proved guilt. Together. It made innocence harder to assume. Luca slipped the phone away. Ms. Hart. You're coming with me. Evelyn's spine stiffened. No. Grant looked almost relieved. Luca studied her. That wasn't a request for custody. It sounded like one. My legal team has the Serrano distribution archive. You have the version problem. We compare them now. Evelyn looked through the ballroom doors. Half the room was pretending not to watch them. If she left with Luca Serrano, minutes after being accused of leaking material to him, every photograph would become another brick in Grant's case. I walk out of here with you, and I validate his story. You stay here. He controls the next hour. Those aren't the only choices. Luca's eyes narrowed slightly. Evelyn turned to the nearest hotel security desk and pointed to the glass meeting room beside the ballroom. Neutral room. Cameras outside. No Serrano files. Leave your counsel's custody. I compare only the distribution index. Grant stays out. Grant stepped forward. You don't have authority to dictate. Luca lifted one finger. Grant stopped. Evelyn hated how effective it was. Luca looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Neutral room. She started toward it, then paused. And nobody touches my phone, my complaint, or my notes. Agreed. Grant's voice followed them. "Evelyn, you're making this worse." She looked back at the man who had once convinced her that avoiding public conflict was the same as being professional. "No, Grant, I'm making you prove it." Luca opened the meeting room door for her. As she passed him, one of his guards said quietly that the first online story had already gone live. Evelyn stepped inside, placed the complaint beneath the white conference light, and saw the headline on the guard's phone through the glass. "Mafia linked attorney, accused of port leak." Luca shut the door. The public damage had begun, and they had 10 days before the contract Grant seemed strangely eager to destroy became irreversible. By 9 the next morning, 3 clients had postponed calls with Evelyn. One trade reporter had left 6 messages, and Grant's ethics complaint had been forwarded to every senior partner in her building. Evelyn sat alone in the conference room at Hart Labor Council with her burgundy gala dress sealed inside a garment bag behind the door, and yesterday's accusation spread across the table in neat columns. She wore a navy blazer, black trousers, and the reading glasses she reserved for documents dense enough to punish carelessness. Every contract version delivered to her firm sat in the secure registry on the left side of her screen. Grant's supposed leaked copy sat on the right. She did not start by searching his name. That would have been emotionally satisfying and professionally useless. She started with the chain. For years, every draft that reached her office had been logged, dated, and marked in her own hand before she reviewed it. The union had received one restricted draft behind closed doors. Evelyn's firm had received only the final version the next morning. Her handwritten intake mark was visible on every legitimate copy. The document Grant blamed on her had none. That did not prove she had never seen it. It did prove the copy had never passed through her ordinary process. Her phone vibrated. Luca Serrano. She let it ring twice before answering. "If this is about dinner." "The answer is no." Pause. "I was going to ask whether you found anything." "Then, your timing needs work." "I'll improve." Evelyn stared at the 2 versions. "Your counsel sent the distribution index at 6 this morning. They said you requested only metadata. Because I don't need privileged content to prove receipt." That annoyed them. "Good." She heard something almost like amusement in his silence. "What did you find?" he asked. "The draft in Grant's complaint went to the union's closed authority group. It did not go to my firm." "Could you have gotten it unofficially?" "Of course. That's why this is suspicion, not proof." Luca did not argue. That mattered more than Evelyn wanted it to. "Who controls the union archive?" he asked. "Naomi Price." "Loyal to you?" "No." "Then why trust her?" "Because she's loyal to the records." Another pause. "You like difficult people. I represent dock workers." Luca gave a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. Evelyn moved to the next page. "There's more." Grant's complaint quotes the emergency authority language exactly as it appeared in the restricted draft. Why is that important? Because it disappeared from the final version. Meaning. Whoever built the accusation didn't just know a leak existed. They had access to a very narrow version window. Luca became silent again. She could almost hear him rearranging people in his mind. How narrow? 7 recipients on the union side. 4 on your corporate side. Maybe 2 external compliance reviewers. And Grant not officially. Not officially is doing a lot of work. That's why we don't accuse him yet. Luca's voice cooled. He publicly accused you. And if I answer bad evidence with bad evidence, I become him. That ended the argument. Evelyn closed the complaint and reached for the brown leather folio beside her laptop. Inside were photocopies of her intake sheets from the past 11 years. Not because she was sentimental, but because systems failed and people lied. She had learned early that a boring habit could become a lifeline. At 10:15, Naomi Price arrived without knocking. She was 52, compact, silver threaded through her close-cropped hair, and, unimpressed by expensive offices, she dropped a canvas records bag on the table. "You've made my morning miserable." "Good morning to you too." Naomi looked at the cameras mounted outside the glass wall. Serrano. Security. Building security. Same men watching. No. You checked. Evelyn pointed to a printed access log. Naomi grunted approval and sat. She removed 3 paper packets from the canvas bag. Each had a red union distribution stamp. These are the versions around the disputed clause, the draft before it, the restricted draft, and the final copy. Evelyn put on nitrile fingertip covers before touching them. Naomi noticed. Still doing that. Still keeping people from claiming I contaminated originals. Naomi pushed the restricted draft forward. 7 copies were issued. 6 returned. 1 was destroyed under witness because the delegates spilled coffee across the signature page. Evelyn looked up. Destroyed how cross-cut shredder. Witnessed by me and the deputy clerk. Destruction log exists. So no unexplained missing paper copy. Not from us. Evelyn examined the footer. Restricted authority review. The unusual clause appeared on page 11. She compared the wording with Grant's complaint. Exact match. Same punctuation. Same capitalized term. Luca arrived 20 minutes later with 1 attorney, and no bodyguards inside the room. Evelyn appreciated the distinction. He stopped when he saw Naomi. "Miss Price." Naomi looked him over. "Mr. Serrano." No fear. No warmth. Luca sat across from Evelyn. "My counsel says the clause originated with a North Atlantic financing condition." Evelyn's eyes lifted. "Your counsel knew that last night?" "No. They traced the drafting note this morning." Naomi leaned back. "North Atlantic doesn't negotiate our labor terms. They do if the concession falls into emergency financing," Evelyn said. The room tightened around the sentence. Luca slid a document across the table. It was not the contract itself. Only a source routing sheet. North Atlantic Transaction Council had submitted a proposed emergency authority mechanism 2 days before the restricted draft. Evelyn followed the routing chain with 1 finger. Outside counsel to Serrano Corporate. Serrano Corporate to Bargaining Council. Bargaining Council to Union Authority Review. "This is the seed," she said. "Not the proof." Luca nodded. "You keep saying that because I want the right person, not the nearest person." Naomi tapped the restricted draft. "There's another problem." Evelyn looked at her. "What?" "Yesterday morning, someone asked me to confirm whether the restricted draft had ever been sent to your office." Evelyn went still. "Who?" "Compliance inquiry. Electronic ticket. Proper format." "From where?" "Terminal identity management." Luca's expression hardened. "North Atlantic has administrative access to part of that system." Evelyn turned to Naomi. "Not." "What did you answer?" "That your office was not on the distribution list." When 8:23, yesterday morning, long before the gala accusation, somebody had checked the exact fact Evelyn used to challenge Grant publicly. Somebody had known the weak point before Grant ever raised the complaint. Evelyn removed her glasses and folded them slowly. Did the ticket identify a user? Naomi pulled a printed slip from her bag. It did. She placed it on the table. Evelyn read the credential twice, because the first time her brain refused to accept it. Her old marital credential. Her old credential. Created during her marriage. When Grant and Evelyn had briefly shared access to a joint port advisory project, deactivated 3 years ago. Luca watched her face. Yours used to be. Who knew it existed? Evelyn looked at the date of reactivation. 6 days before the gala. Grant did. Luca reached for the paper. Evelyn covered it with her hand before he could touch it. No. His eyes met hers. Why? Because right now, this is Naomi's record. Generated from a union inquiry trail. If you take it, Grant gets to say the Mafia boss contaminated the evidence against the woman he kissed. Naomi's mouth twitched. Luca leaned back. Then, what do you want? Evelyn looked from the reactivated credential to the restricted draft, and finally to the source routing sheet linking the disputed clause to North Atlantic financing. 3 pieces. 3 different systems. None enough alone. Together. They formed the first shape of a plan. I want Naomi to authenticate this copy. I want your counsel to preserve the routing sheet without sending me the underlying privileged file. And I want nobody on your side searching that credential. Luca's brows drew together. Why would I not search it? Because if someone reactivated my old access to build a trail, they may be monitoring who notices. Naomi nodded once. Luca did not. So we wait. No. Evelyn slid the papers into 3 separate transparent sleeves. We act like we haven't seen it. Luca studied her. And then Evelyn looked at the credential bearing the name she had stopped using years ago. Then we see who gets nervous when I ask the wrong question in the right place. Her phone lit up before she could continue. An automated security notice filled the screen. Unusual login detected. Port Compliance Archive. Current session. Active. Evelyn had not logged into that archive. She turned the phone toward Luca and Naomi. Someone was using her resurrected identity again. And this time they were doing it while she watched. Evelyn stared at the security alert, while the active session counter continued climbing. Someone using her dead credential had opened the Port Compliance Archive less than 30 seconds earlier. Don't touch anything, she said. Luca had already reached for his phone. He stopped. Naomi leaned across the table instead. Can they see this device? Not through my phone, Evelyn said. But if the credential is being monitored, whoever activated it may be waiting for a response from my office or Serrano Security. The screen refreshed. Current session. Terminal records. Node 3. Evelyn knew the restricted compliance archive. It sat inside the administrative records wing at Pier 14, physically separated from the cargo network. Ordinary attorneys had no reason to enter it. Compliance administrators did. I need a clean machine, she said. Naomi pointed toward an old union laptop inside her canvas bag. Offline, unless I connect it. Keep it offline. Evelyn opened her folio and wrote the alert time and archive location by hand. Luca watched her. You're documenting something we can already screenshot. Screenshots can be challenged. Contemporaneous notes tell an investigator what I knew before the record changes. She looked at Naomi. Call your deputy clerk. Don't mention me. Ask whether anyone requested physical access to the archive this morning. Naomi moved into the hall. Luca remained seated. You think whoever is inside will erase something? I think they're either planting evidence or checking whether yesterday's trail survived. And you want to go there? Eventually. No. Evelyn looked at him over her glasses. That word works better on employees. Someone is impersonating you inside a building where North Atlantic controls part of the access system, which is exactly why I need to know what ordinary records they can reach. My people can find out. Your people showing up creates the same contamination problem we discussed 10 minutes ago. Luca stood. And you walking in gives them the person they are framing. I'm not walking in blind. Naomi returned before he could answer. Deputy Clark says a routine maintenance block was placed on the archive corridor from 11 to noon. Compliance systems inspection. Evelyn checked the clock. 17 minutes. Who requested it? Ticket came through terminal operations. Name. No individual. Department credential. Luca took out his phone. Pier 14 operations. Answers to Serrano Maritime. And parts of compliance are administered by North Atlantic contractors. Evelyn said, If you call operations now. Whoever created the block knows. We noticed. Luca looked at her. Then lowered the phone. What are you proposing? Evelyn drew 3 boxes on her notepad. First, test the innocent explanation. Naomi asks for a routine audit export from the union side. Nothing about my credential. If the session is legitimate maintenance, the archive should behave normally. Second, my office sends no inquiry at all. Third, we preserve every external log we can access without touching the restricted compliance archive. Naomi nodded. I can request the audit export. She did it from the union laptop. The response arrived 90 seconds later. Request. Denied. Record index. Temporarily unavailable. Evelyn wrote down the time. That is not normal. Naomi said, Maintenance can make a node read-only. It should not erase the index. Luca's phone vibrated. His counsel had sent an entry log from the building's independent physical security system. Evelyn read it without taking the device from his hand. No badge entry had been recorded for Evelyn that morning. No visitor pass. No temporary legal credential. Yet the compliance archive showed her identity active inside the restricted compliance archive. Level 1. She said, The official story is incomplete. Nothing more. Luca stared at the mismatch. You're standing here, and your credential is active there, which proves impersonation if both systems are authentic. It does not prove who is doing it. Naomi's laptop chimed again. A second automated message appeared. Archive purge queued. Naomi swore. Evelyn checked the wall clock. They had only minutes. What gets purged? Luca asked. Temporary access tickets. Cached routing tables. Duplicate inquiry logs. Evelyn was already gathering the sleeved documents, including the record showing who checked that restricted draft yesterday. Then we stopped the purge. Not through the compromised system. Evelyn stood. Naomi. Does the union still keep the mirrored maintenance ledger? In the physical records, room, paper printouts, weekly binders. Those can't be remotely purged. Naomi understood first. Pier 14. Luca moved around the table. You are not going alone. I didn't say. I was. 26 minutes later. Evelyn entered Pier 14 through the union administration door, with Naomi beside her and one Serrano driver waiting outside the secure boundary. Luca had argued until Evelyn gave him a choice. Respect the independent custody chain, or destroy the usefulness of whatever they found. He shows the chain. The records wing smelled of dust. Copier toner. and salt air leaking through old seals. Naomi signed them into the union side. The purge had already run. The electronic index showed no inquiry from the previous morning. Evelyn photographed the blank screen with Naomi's timestamp clock visible beside it. Now, the paper ledger, she said. Naomi unlocked a fire-rated records room at the end of the corridor. Inside, shelves of binders ran beneath exposed sprinkler pipes. Evelyn found the current week and flipped to yesterday. The inquiry was there, under her old marital credential. It had asked whether the restricted draft reached her office, and the origin field pointed to North Atlantic compliance. Evelyn felt the first solid piece settle into place. Not Grant. Not yet, but the credential and the corporate environment had finally touched the same record. She photographed the page. Then, Naomi signed a photocopy and sealed it in an evidence envelope. A metallic clunk sounded behind them. The records room door had closed. Naomi crossed to it and pushed the bar. Nothing happened. Magnetic lock, she said. Evelyn checked her phone. No signal. The corridor window in the door darkened as the automatic fire shutters began lowering outside. That's not maintenance. Naomi pulled the emergency release. Dead. Evelyn looked toward the ceiling. Fire compartment controls. She had reviewed the building's safety language during a contract dispute 2 years earlier. Records rooms could lock for smoke containment, but the internal fire isolation switch had to mechanically release the door before suppressant activation. Back wall, she said. They moved between shelves. A red panel sat behind a hanging evacuation map. Evelyn broke the clear plastic cover with the metal spine of the binder. The edge sliced across her forearm. She barely felt it. She pulled the isolation lever. Somewhere above them, a motor engaged. The door released for 3 seconds. Go. Naomi shoved through first. Evelyn followed as the descending shutter caught her shoulder and knocked her sideways into the frame. Pain flashed down her arm, but she stayed upright. They cleared the corridor before the shutter sealed behind them. Luca was already inside the outer administration area when they emerged. His driver had called after losing contact with them. He crossed the room fast, saw blood running from Evelyn's forearm, and something in his control snapped. Seal Pierre, Pais Prezece, he told the men behind him. Nobody leaves. Find who touched that fire system and bring him to me before sundown. 2 guards moved at once. Evelyn caught Luca by the sleeve with her uninjured hand. A bright smear of her blood marked his gray cuff. No. He looked down at her fingers. Then at her face. They locked you in a room. His voice had dropped so low, Naomi stopped moving. And I got out. If you turn this pier into a hostage scene, you destroy the evidence. Chain and hand. Grant a cleaner story than the one he already has. Luca's throat worked once. For a second, the men around him waited to see which version of him would win. Evelyn did not release his sleeve. Preserve the logs. Preserve the doors. Nobody gets touched. Luca held her gaze, then raised one hand. Stand down. Do exactly what she said. The guard stopped without argument. Only then did Luca reach toward her wounded arm. His hand hovered a fraction from the bloodied cloth before he forced it back to his side. What happened? Someone triggered the fire isolation after we copied the paper maintenance ledger. The physical log ties my old marital credential to North Atlantic compliance. Naomi held up the sealed copy. This stays with me. Luca looked from the envelope to the sealed corridor. Who knew you were coming here? You. Naomi. Me. Your driver. Evelyn paused. And whoever was watching the archive knew exactly when we touched the physical record. Luca's phone rang. He answered, listened for 6 seconds, then handed it to Evelyn. On the screen was a security still from another camera inside Pier 14. It showed Evelyn entering the records wing with a binder under her arm. The timestamp had been altered to 1051, 25 minutes before she had actually arrived. Beneath the image sat a newly generated incident report. Attorney Evelyn Hart removed, restricted compliance material prior to archive purge. Evelyn read it once. Then again, whoever was framing her had stopped preparing for her investigation. They were now writing the story in real time. The first call from Serrano Legal came before Evelyn's cut was fully closed. She sat in a small union medical office while Naomi pressed butterfly strips across the shallow wound and an ice pack rested against Evelyn's bruised shoulder. Luca stood by the sink, listening as his general counsel described 3 new pieces of evidence that had appeared within 12 minutes of the Pier 14 incident report. A forwarded email showed Evelyn sending a restricted draft to an outside address. An access log placed her credential inside the restricted compliance archive before the purge. A compliance officer named Martin Vale had submitted a written statement claiming Evelyn had asked him 2 weeks earlier how North Atlantic's emergency financing provisions could be activated. "Did you?" Luca asked when the call ended. "I spoke to Vale at a labor briefing," Evelyn said. "I asked who had authority to suspend operations during a safety emergency. That is not the same question. Can you prove the wording?" "Not unless the briefing was recorded." Naomi taped the final strip into place. Her paper ledger proves the credential was being used through North Atlantic compliance. Luca looked at the sealed envelope on Naomi's desk. And they now have an electronic log saying the credential was Evelyn, which is why we need independent authentication, Evelyn said. She slid her blazer carefully over the injured arm. The shoulder protested. "The building entry record says I wasn't here when their log says I was. That contradiction matters." Luca paced once, then stopped. "My counsel says the email came from your firm's authenticated domain." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "Show me." He sent it to a screen on the wall. The message was short. No dramatic confession, no obvious fabrication. It contained exactly the kind of restrained language Evelyn used professionally. "Attached is the restricted authority draft we discussed. Confirm receipt outside the ordinary union channel." The file attached was the restricted draft. The sender line displayed her address. The timestamp was 8 days before the gala. "Header data?" she asked. "Authenticated through your firm's mail relay. Device token, linked to one of your historical credentials." Evelyn stared at the timestamp. 8 days earlier. She had been in a mediation room from 7 in the morning until almost 9 at night. But presence somewhere else did not prove she had not scheduled or remotely sent an email. "My calendar won't clear me," she said. "No." Luca's answer was quiet. "And Vale, he says you were unusually interested in the concession default." "I am a labor lawyer. I was negotiating a contract that could trigger it." Luca rubbed one thumb across the side of his phone. Evelyn recognized the movement now. It was not anger. It was calculation. She hated that she knew enough about him to see the difference. "What aren't you saying?" she asked. "The outside address belongs to a holding company that has moved money through organizations associated with my family." Naomi looked at him sharply. Evelyn stayed still. There it was, the independent-looking corroboration. The frame needed. Contract, access, email, money channel, witness. and the photograph of her inside the records wing carrying a binder. Someone had built a case designed not merely to survive a glance, but to survive doubt. Luca's phone lit once. He read the message and said, "Grant is still at the Drake. My men can have him downstairs in 3 minutes." The sentence carried no heat, which made it worse. Evelyn looked at him, and then every lawyer in this city says the Mafia intimidated the man accusing me. Leave him where he is. Luca's thumb rested over the reply. You keep asking me to leave men untouched, who keep reaching for you, because I want them convicted by their own choices, not frightened into a story. He watched her for a beat, then typed one line. Observe only. No contact. Who's holding company? Evelyn asked. That stays with counsel until they authenticate the ownership chain. Fair. Luca looked surprised. You agree I'm not asking you to believe me because you kissed me once. You kissed me. Despite everything. Naomi made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Evelyn ignored both of them. The point is the same. Personal conviction is useless. We need contradictions that survive hostile review. Luca's expression tightened. My board is already demanding you be removed from the negotiation. Then, remove me. Naomi turned. Evelyn. Temporarily. Evelyn faced Luca. If the agreement survives only because the accused attorney stays inside the room, Grant wins the optics, even if the evidence collapses later. Luca stepped closer. You're making this easy for me. No. I'm removing an excuse. His gaze held hers. There's a difference between stepping aside and being excluded. Then which one are you choosing? The silence stretched. Luca looked at the incident report again. Evelyn saw the exact moment. Partial evidence outweighed the contradiction in front of him. His jaw did not tighten. He did not threaten anyone. He simply became more formal. Until the email and access chain are independently reviewed, Serrano Maritime will suspend your access to our negotiation files and facilities. Naomi swore under her breath. Evelyn felt the sentence harder than she expected. The man who had accepted her conditions at the gala was now placing her outside the case she had spent months building. She kept her voice steady. And my union representation. Not mine to terminate. Good answer. Luca continued. My security team will escort you home. No. Evelyn. You just removed my access because you believe I may be compromised. You don't get to send your people into my private movements in the same breath. Someone locked you inside a records room. And I got out. With blood on your arm. A shallow cut and a bruise do not transfer authority over my life to you. Naomi stood between them without actually moving between them. Luca looked at Evelyn's bandaged forearm. Then back at her face. What do you want? A car service not owned by Serrano Maritime. Naomi keeps the ledger copy. Your counsel preserves everything exactly where it is. Nobody contacts Vale. Nobody confronts Grant. And nobody searches my old credential until an independent image of the server is taken. Luca's voice went flat. You are giving instructions after I removed you. I am preserving evidence after you removed me. For a moment. Evelyn thought he might refuse, simply because the distinction cost him control. Instead, he nodded. Done. It should have felt like a victory. It did not. 30 minutes later, Evelyn left Pier 14 in a union-arranged sedan with her folio on her lap and no Serrano vehicle behind her. Her shoulder hurt every time the car turned. She took 2 over-the-counter pain tablets Naomi had given her and called her managing partner. He answered on the first ring. Where are you? On my way back. Don't come here. Evelyn closed her eyes for 1 second. Why? The ethics committee issued an interim preservation order. Our insurer wants your system access frozen until we complete an internal review. You know, the draft in the complaint never entered our registry. I know what the registry says. I also know there is now an authenticated email from our domain. And you think I sent it? I think I cannot let you touch the system while someone is alleging you did. The sentence was almost identical to Luca's logic. Reasonable. Controlled. Devastating. Evelyn looked through the window at cranes rising over the harbor. Preserve my workstation exactly as it is. Do not re-image it. Do not reset my credentials. And have outside forensic counsel collect it. Already requested. At least someone was thinking. My client files. Reassigned temporarily. She swallowed. Understood. When the call ended, the driver asked where she wanted to go. Evelyn gave him her home address. Then changed her mind. Union Records Annex on Franklin Street. Ms. Price said home. Miss. Price isn't my supervisor. The driver hesitated. Then changed lanes. The Franklin Annex occupied the second floor above an old marine insurance office. Naomi had once shown Evelyn the archive during a contract history dispute. It had no connection to Serrano systems and only limited connectivity to the terminal network. Evelyn arrived just after 4. Her access card still worked because the union, unlike everyone else, had not suspended her. She did not enter the restricted archive. Instead, she sat at a public research terminal and opened the historical contract index. Grant's complaint claimed she had discussed emergency financing with Martin Vale 2 weeks earlier. She found the briefing agenda. Vale had not been listed as a compliance speaker. He had substituted for someone else at the last minute. Evelyn checked the attendee revision notice. The change had been uploaded 43 minutes before the briefing. Requesting Party North Atlantic Infrastructure Group. She printed the notice. That still did not prove Grant controlled Vale. But it showed her supposedly suspicious conversation had been made possible by a corporate substitution she could not have predicted. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She did not open the attachment. She read only the preview. You should have taken the deal at the gala. A second message appeared. Stop digging, or your mother's facility gets the compliance review next. Evelyn's hands went still. Grant knew about her mother. So did dozens of people. Threat knowledge was not attribution. She photographed the screen with the annex wall clock visible. Then powered the phone off and placed it in an empty archival evidence pouch from the supply desk. She would not give the sender a read receipt or another active connection. Across town, Luca sat in Serrano Maritime's executive conference room as his counsel placed Evelyn's suspension notice beside the negotiation calendar. Without her, the union had already rejected 2 wording revisions. His replacement attorneys believed were routine. Luca read the second rejection. The problem was an amendment cross-reference. Evelyn had warned his team about 3 weeks earlier. He reached for the internal memo she had written. At the top of the first page, in her precise handwriting, was the same intake notation she had described at the gala. Every draft in the file carried one. Every draft, except the restricted draft. His general counsel said, "That proves her habit. It doesn't clear the email." I know. Luca turned to the pier. 14 physical entry report. The exterior cameras showed Evelyn arriving nearly half an hour after the compliance system claimed she was already inside. And this could be credential cloning. which means someone framed at least one part. Possibly. Luca looked toward the glass wall, overlooking the harbor. He had not reached 3 contradictions. He had one and the beginning of another. Not enough to reverse his decision. Enough to make him distrust the people who wanted him to stop looking. He picked up his phone and called his security director. "I'm going to send 3 meeting locations for tomorrow's emergency labor session," he said. 3 different locations. 3 different recipients. No one gets more than one. Across the city, Evelyn sat alone in the Franklin Annex, with her dead phone sealed beside her, and the North Atlantic substitution notice under her hand. She had lost Serrano access, her firm access, and most of the benefit of the doubt, but Grant's frame had made one mistake. It had assumed isolation would make her stop working. Evelyn pulled a fresh legal pad toward her and began reconstructing the conspiracy from records no one had thought worth stealing. By 8 the next morning, the labor negotiation had lost 12 hours and 2 clauses that everyone in Luca Serrano's conference room had believed were settled. The replacement attorneys had treated an old cross-reference as clerical language and accidentally reopened a pension safeguard that required a fresh delegate review. Evelyn had warned them about that exact trap 3 weeks earlier. Luca stood at the head of the table, while his general counsel explained why the mistake might cost another day. He listened without interrupting, then opened Evelyn's suspended file and found the memo. Her handwriting sat in the margin beside the clause, "Do not move without matching Amendment 4B." It was the same habit he had seen across every legitimate draft she had touched. Date. Intake code. Cross-reference. Nothing decorative. Nothing missing. He pulled the restricted draft from the evidence summary. No intake code. No handwritten cross-reference. No evidence that the copy had ever passed through her process. That was the personal contradiction. It did not clear the email, but it made the accusation weaker than his own people had admitted when they recommended suspending her. He moved to the physical access report from Pier 14. The union sign-in and the independent exterior cameras both showed Evelyn arriving nearly half an hour after the compliance system claimed her credential was already active inside. 2 of those records sat outside North Atlantic's control. Luca looked at his security director. Can the camera clock be wrong by 25 minutes? Not without changing the daily synchronization record. Was it changed? No. Then she wasn't inside the building. At 1051. Her credential was... Luca set the report down. That was the technical contradiction. Someone had used Evelyn's identity before she arrived and had then altered an internal security still to place her physically beside the false activity. It was no longer possible to treat every piece of evidence as naturally occurring. Someone had manufactured at least part of the case. The question was whether Evelyn had helped manufacture the rest. Luca had spent most of his adult life around men who mistook suspicion for certainty. He had survived by refusing that luxury. Yet with Evelyn, he had done exactly what he despised. In others, accepted a story because enough separate pieces pointed in the same direction. Not proof. A story. He picked up 3 envelopes, prepared before dawn. Each contained the same emergency labor session time and a different location. His general counsel received the Harbor Exchange conference room. His terminal operations chief received a private dining room at the Atlantic Club. Martin Vale received the location of an old maintenance warehouse no one had used for negotiations in years. No electronic calendar updates. Luca said. No assistant copies. No driver briefings. You each know one location. Vale adjusted his cuff. Why the secrecy? Because every location change has leaked within an hour. Luca watched him answer. So today we give the leak less room. At 10:20, Luca's security director received a call from one of the men monitoring the exterior approaches to Pier 14. Two private investigators, employed by a North Atlantic contractor, had parked across from the old maintenance warehouse. One carried a telephoto camera. The other had photographed every vehicle entering the service road. No one had appeared at the harbor exchange. No one watched the Atlantic Club. Luca asked for timestamps. The first surveillance car reached the old maintenance warehouse 47 minutes after Vale received the false location. He asked whether Vale had made any recorded phone calls. None through Serrano systems. That meant little. He could have used a personal device, a messenger, or an intermediary. But the reaction was real. Controlled information had moved toward Grant's corporate environment. That was the adversarial contradiction. 3 contradictions. Personal, technical, adversarial. Enough to reopen the accusation. Not enough to convict Grant. Luca called his general counsel back into the room. Unsuspend Hart from my internal inquiry. From negotiation access too. Not yet. Why not? Because I still don't know who owns the email route. And if I restore everything before I understand it, I tell whoever built this frame exactly what changed my mind. She nodded. And Evelyn Luca looked at the empty chair where Evelyn had sat during the gala comparison. Find out whether Naomi Price has spoken to her. You told security not to track her. I'm not ordering surveillance. Ask Naomi to deliver a message. Across the city, Evelyn sat in a small conference room at the Franklin Union Annex with her sealed phone on the table and 3 years of archived compliance notices stacked beside her. She had spent the night in a hotel under her mother's maiden name after moving her mother to a different assisted living wing through the facility's administrator. She had not told the administrator about Grant. She had simply invoked the facility's written privacy protocol after receiving a threat tied to a possible compliance inspection. The administrator had agreed because Evelyn had drafted the protocol herself during a pro bono review 2 years earlier. At Nowe Patruzic A.M. A man claiming to represent a regional healthcare compliance contractor had appeared at the original wing asking for Evelyn's mother by full name. The facility refused him entry because he had no appointment number, and his letter cited a federal regulation that did not apply to private assisted living. Evelyn learned this when the administrator called the annex landline. Did he leave a card? Evelyn asked. Yes. Seal it in an envelope. Don't photograph it. Don't email it. You think this is connected to you? I think someone expected me to panic. When the call ended, Naomi came through the door, carrying coffee and a face that told Evelyn she already knew enough to be angry. Luca sent a message. Evelyn did not look up from the notices. Then he can wait. He said, the 3 contradictions are now on record. Evelyn's pen stopped. All 3. He ran controlled locations. The one sent to Martin Vale drew North Atlantic surveillance. Evelyn looked up. How fast? Under an hour. That changed the shape of the case. Vale had not merely become a witness against her by coincidence. He had become a channel. Did Luca contact him? No. Grant? No. Good. Naomi put the coffee beside her. There's more. Outside Forensic Counsel imaged your workstation before anyone reset the system. The email did pass through your firm's relay. But the sending token wasn't created on your current device. Evelyn felt the room sharpen. What device? They don't know yet. Legacy authentication record. The old credential. Maybe. Evelyn stood too quickly, and pain pulled through her bruised shoulder. She slowed. waited for it to settle, then reached for her coat. "Where are you going?" Naomi asked. "Not to Luca," I assumed. "I need the historical authentication tables from the independent identity vendor. If the token was minted outside my current device, the vendor may still have the original enrollment hash. Your firm can request it. My firm is under preservation restrictions. I can't touch the request chain without creating another argument about interference." Naomi watched her. "So who can Evelyn?" Looked at the union authorization on the wall. "You can request records related to a credential used to access union-controlled material." Naomi exhaled through her nose. "You are exhausting. That is why they pay me." They were halfway to the records desk when the annex receptionist called Naomi's name from the hall. A courier had arrived with an envelope for Evelyn. No return address. Evelyn did not touch it. Set it on the counter. The courier left. Naomi put on gloves and opened the outer flap. Inside was a photocopy of Evelyn's mother's medication schedule and a handwritten line. "Next time the review doesn't stop at the front desk." Evelyn read it without moving. Whoever had built the legal frame was now using personal pressure because the documentary pressure had not stopped her. That was useful information. Terrible. But useful. Grant had shifted from reputation damage to coercion. People escalated when their original mechanism was failing. Evelyn turned to Naomi. "Call Luca." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "You're ready to trust him?" "No." Evelyn slid the threat into an evidence sleeve. "I'm ready to use a contradiction," he finally earned. Luca arrived at the Franklin Annex without a convoy, without visible weapons, and without attempting to enter until Naomi opened the door. Evelyn noticed all three choices. She also noticed that he brought his general counsel instead of security. Better. Not forgiveness. Better. Evelyn waited in the records conference room with the threat sealed in front of her and her injured forearm resting against the table. Luca stopped across from her. His attention went straight to the bandage. He lifted one hand, stopped before touching her, and asked, "May I?" Evelyn hesitated, then turned her arm palm up. His fingers closed carefully around her wrist, large enough to circle it without pressure. His thumb brushed the clean edge of the dressing once. "They locked you in that room, and you still walked back into the case." His voice had gone rough and quiet. "A piece of plastic cut me. Don't turn it into a legend. I'm not." His gaze stayed on the bandage another second before he released her and stepped back, putting the table between them again. The restraint landed harder than possession would have. Naomi said, "Someone went to your mother's facility. Someone tried. Where is she?" "Safe." "Do you want protection placed there?" "No Serrano personnel inside the facility. One vehicle on the public street, if you insist. No contact with staff. Residents. Or my mother." Luca nodded. "Done." He did not argue. Evelyn marked that too. His general counsel set down a forensic summary. "Your firm's outside examiner confirmed the email relay was authentic," she said. "But the session that generated it did not originate from Evelyn's current workstation, phone, or office network." Evelyn opened the summary, but did not remove it from the table. "Legacy token, yes. The token traces to her old marital credential." Luca watched her reaction. "Your old joint credential." "Not joint. Mine." Grant knew the enrollment answers and recovery process because we worked the same advisory project while we were married. Could he reactivate it alone? Not without administrative assistance. Luca slid another report toward her. Martin Vale had that level of assistance. The report showed Vale's compliance permissions, identity resets, temporary token restoration, archive query access. Evelyn read every line twice. That gives means, not intent. Agreed. Luca's answer came immediately. She looked up. He had learned something. Maybe only vocabulary. Maybe more. Vale received the old maintenance warehouse location. Luca continued. North Atlantic surveillance appeared there 47 minutes later. Can you prove the investigators' work? For North Atlantic, contract records tie their firm to a North Atlantic subsidiary. Directly. One layer removed. Then it proves a connection. Not control. His general counsel nodded. Luca did not look irritated. Evelyn turned back to the threat against her mother. The person who went to the facility cited the wrong regulation. That means whoever sent him cared more about frightening me than passing a real compliance review. Grant knew your mother's location. So did my firm. My insurer. 2 healthcare providers. And half the forms I filled out during the divorce. Knowledge is not attribution. Luca leaned his palms on the table, then seemed to reconsider the posture and sat instead. I was wrong to treat the evidence against you as settled. Evelyn said nothing. He continued. I removed you before I had tested the contradictions. That increased your isolation when someone was already trying to control your access. Still, she said nothing. I'm not asking you to excuse it. Good. I'm telling you the decision was mine. That was better than an apology built to win something. Evelyn closed the forensic summary. Then don't repeat it. What do you need? Independent access to the identity vendor. Naomi requests the historical enrollment hash. Your counsel requests the North Atlantic Administrator history. Neither side tells the other what wording they use. Luca looked at his counsel. Do it. Evelyn continued. And I want Martin Vale untouched. You think he'll move if he knows we're onto him? I think he already moved. Surveillance at the old maintenance warehouse means information is flowing outward. If you confront him, you close the channel. What channel do you want? The one that leads past him. Luca's gaze sharpened. Grant. Maybe Grant? Maybe someone above Grant. We still don't know whether North Atlantic wants the labor agreement delayed, voided, or replaced. Emergency financing gives them leverage if ratification fails. Leverage is not the same as objective. Evelyn pulled a blank pad toward her. We need to identify what they gain at midnight. Luca's general counsel opened a second folder. There is a Pier 14 financing side letter. North Atlantic gets emergency takeover rights if the terminal concession enters documented labor, instability, and a safety suspension inside the same 10-day window. Evelyn's pen stopped. Both conditions, both. Not one or the other. Both. Evelyn looked at Luca. Then the leak accusation alone was never enough. He understood. They need the labor vote damaged and the terminal operations disrupted. Exactly. She turned pages. The ethics complaint removes me from negotiations. The false leak makes the union distrust Serrano. But unless operations are also interrupted, North Atlantic cannot invoke the full emergency clause, which means the next move should hit Pier 14. And it has to look legitimate. Luca's counsel said. Safety inspection. Evelyn thought of the threat against her mother. The false compliance inspector. The fire isolation system at the records wing. Same behavioral preference. Administrative mechanisms used as weapons. Not necessarily the same person. She said. But the method repeats. They like actions that create official-looking paperwork before anyone understands the consequence. Luca leaned back. You think Grant is building toward a safety shutdown? I think someone is. Evelyn stood and moved to the wall map of Pier 14. Her shoulder hurt when she lifted her arm, so she used the other hand. A false hazardous cargo declaration could close a berth without touching the whole terminal. A refrigeration failure could stop specific containers. A fire code hold could interrupt union staffing. They need a disruption strong enough to satisfy the financing clause, but controlled enough not to destroy the asset they want to acquire. Luca looked at her. That is the objective. It's the first complete layer. Discredit the attorney. Destabilize. Ratification. Trigger a controlled operational shutdown. Invoke emergency takeover financing. Acquire leverage over Pier 14. And Vale provides compliance access. Grant likely coordinates the legal side because he understands my habits and the contract. Likely. Luca repeated the word without mocking it. Evelyn returned to the table. We still need proof of intent, a source document showing the takeover objective, and an independent act showing someone knowingly used our planted information. The old maintenance warehouse test is already controlled information. It proves Vale's channel leaks toward North Atlantic. It does not prove Grant controls the sabotage. Luca's mouth tightened, but he nodded. So we build a better trap. One Lee, Evelyn said. His counsel frowned. One harmless, false deadline. We give it to Vale and no one else. If North Atlantic repeats it, the route becomes easy enough for a jury or a tired listener to follow without a chart. Luca studied her. You need access to my internal distribution list. I need authority to control exactly what Vale sees. That is more than access. Yes, and you expect me to follow your plan. If you don't, find another lawyer. Silence held for a moment. Luca reached into his jacket, removed a slim access card, and placed it on the table. Temporary internal review credential. Read only. Every access logged. Evelyn did not take it. Who can revoke it? Me. Then it is not independent enough. His general counsel almost smiled. Luca looked genuinely irritated. What do you want? Dual control. You and Naomi. Neither one alone can expand it or shut me out. Naomi folded her arms. I can live with that. Luca stared at Evelyn, then slid the card toward Naomi instead. The gesture was small, but Evelyn understood what it cost him. He had surrendered unilateral control because she asked him to, publicly. You still do nothing for me, Evelyn said. His attention returned to her. That costs you? Yes. You are asking me to leave the accusation standing until we can reverse it with proof instead of affection. He went still at the word. Evelyn held his gaze. The kiss made me look guilty. If you defend me because of the kiss, Grant wins twice. Luca gave one slow nod. Then I defend the process. Exactly. The annex receptionist called Naomi's name. The identity vendor had finally answered the preservation request. Naomi opened the message on the conference screen. Evelyn's old marital credential had been reactivated through Martin Vale's administrator access, and the recovery request carried North Atlantic authorization. Luca's general counsel leaned toward the screen. That closes the access chain. Not Grant, Evelyn said. Not yet. Evelyn pulled a fresh legal page toward her and wrote one simple sentence at the top. The union must certify by 8-3-0 or the ratification fails. Luca read it. That is false. That is why it works. She folded the page once. Tomorrow, Evelyn said. We give Vale one lie and see who repeats it. Evelyn reduced the trap to one sentence because she wanted everyone in the room to remember it without notes. She wrote it on a yellow legal pad and turned it toward Luca and Naomi. The union must certify by 8:30 or the ratification fails. Luca read it twice. That is not true. Exactly. Evelyn tapped the page. There is no 8:30 cutoff. Midnight is the only real deadline. We send this false rule to one person, Martin Vale. Nobody else receives it, if North Atlantic acts on 8:30. We know his channel carried it. Naomi nodded. One false fact. One recipient. One reaction. Evelyn said. It was cleaner than 3 codes. 3 files. Or a maze of numbers. Nobody would remember in a hearing. Vale received the sentence through an ordinary compliance update that looked harmless among a dozen other procedural messages. Serrano Operations received only the true schedule. North Atlantic's financing liaison received nothing about an early cutoff. Naomi wrote down who had seen the false rule, sealed the page, and placed the original in her union evidence envelope. Luca watched Evelyn flex her bruised shoulder before she reached for the next folder. Without comment, he moved the heavier stack closer to her uninjured side. She noticed. So did he. Neither mentioned it. A little over an hour later, North Atlantic's Outside Financing Council uploaded a revised emergency checklist. One new sentence had appeared if the union failed to certify by 8:30. Labor instability could be declared before midnight. The room went still. Luca looked at Evelyn. Only Vale had that time. Yes. Then Vale is feeding North Atlantic. His channel is. She corrected. We still prove who sits above him. Luca gave her a long look. But this time, he did not argue with the distinction. The document was preserved through outside counsel, so nobody from Serrano could alter it. Naomi sealed a printed copy beside the handwritten false rule. The chain was now simple enough to explain in one breath. Evelyn invented a deadline that did not exist, told only Vale. And North Atlantic repeated it. That gave them a connection. It still did not explain why North Atlantic cared so much about the vote. Luca's general counsel brought in the financing side letter they had been tracing. Evelyn read the operative paragraph and translated it into plain English for everyone at the table. North Atlantic gets emergency control only if 2 things happen close together. The labor agreement has to destabilize, and Pier 14 has to suffer an official safety shutdown. Luca leaned back. So discrediting you was only half the job. Yes. If I am pushed out and the union loses confidence in the negotiations, they create labor instability. Then they need a shutdown that looks legitimate. Naomi looked toward the harbor map. And if the vote survives, their emergency takeover window closes. That was why the public ratification could not be cancelled. A postponement would hand North Atlantic the very instability it needed. Evelyn asked the Union Council for Independent Authority to appear at the hearing as Contract Integrity Council. Naomi made the request without using Luca's name. 2 hours later, the written authorization arrived. She placed it in front of him. She is not your lawyer at the hearing. Luca read the page. Good. Evelyn studied him. Even if I challenge Serrano Maritime in public, if the evidence points there. Yes. And if your own people hate it, they can survive discomfort. The answer was dry. But his eyes stayed on her longer than the joke required. The next question was motive. They knew North Atlantic wanted emergency control. but they needed an independent record showing that the takeover mechanism had existed before Grant accused Evelyn. Luca's counsel found a reference to a hidden acquisition schedule in a lender file. North Atlantic's outside financing firm had mirrored it weeks before the gala. They could not access the full document yet. But a neutral lender and the port concession monitor both had references to it. That is where the objective lives. Evelyn said, "If the acquisition plan predates the accusation, then my supposed leak was not the crisis that created their response. It was part of a plan already moving." By late afternoon, outside financing counsel confirmed an archived acquisition document existed and agreed to preserve it under neutral escrow. They would seek permission to release an authenticated copy the next morning. Luca wanted it immediately. Evelyn wanted it clean. If we force the wrong door tonight. Grant spends tomorrow arguing contamination instead of substance. You say that as if I enjoy waiting. You do not. I hate it. That may be your first useful confession. The corner of his mouth moved. It was small, but the tension in the room eased for half a second. Then Luca's phone vibrated. North Atlantic had filed a formal request for a hazardous cargo inspection at Pier 14 on the morning of ratification. The complaint alleged undeclared lithium battery shipments inside refrigerated containers. Naomi read the notice and looked at Evelyn. There is the shutdown. There is the attempt. Evelyn said, "We still make them prove the cargo is dangerous." She told Luca's operations chief to follow normal safety procedure. Preserve the original carrier manifests. Photograph every container seal. And create a handwritten backup of any critical inspection record. No special treatment. She said, "No shouting that the inspection is corrupt. If the cargo is safe, the physical facts will outlive whatever somebody types into a system." Luca ended the call and looked at her. "You really believe paper can beat all of this?" "I believe a record nobody can rewrite remotely is worth keeping when someone keeps rewriting screens." He looks down at the bandage on her forearm. "Paper also cut you open. That was plastic. I dislike the distinction." At 7:18 that evening, Naomi's desk phone rang. She listened, without speaking, then slowly lowered herself into the chair. "The Franklin archive has been placed under emergency preservation control." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "Reason. They say I mishandled evidence by creating independent copies outside the centralized system." Luca's face hardened. Naomi gave a humorless laugh. "Apparently, preserving the paper trail is now the offense." Evelyn looked at the sealed envelope containing the false 830 rule and the North Atlantic checklist that had repeated it. Grant's side had understood what Naomi represented an archive they could not quietly rewrite. The trap had worked. Now, the people behind it were moving to take away the witness who had kept it alive. The suspension order removed Naomi from the Franklin archive the next morning. It did not accuse her of destroying evidence. It accused her of preserving too much of it without centralized authorization. That distinction made Evelyn angrier because it was designed to sound reasonable. A port compliance officer arrived with 2 neutral records technicians and a signed administrative directive temporarily transferring custody of the union's restricted archive to an outside preservation vendor. Naomi read every page before surrendering a single key. "You understand," she said to the officer, "that my independently sealed copies remain union property. Anything created from restricted port systems falls under the order. The paper maintenance ledger was a union record before this order existed." The officer hesitated. Evelyn noticed. "And the authenticated copy was created before any preservation transfer," she added. You can inventory it. You cannot retroactively change custody. Luca stood 6 feet away and let Evelyn handle it. That was the plan. Grant needed to believe Luca had not brought her back into his authority structure. The officer finally agreed to log Naomi's sealed envelope as pre-existing union evidence and placed it inside a tamper-evident case. Evelyn wrote down the seal number herself. Naomi surrendered the archive key. "Congratulations," she said to no one in particular. "You have successfully protected the records from the woman who has protected them for 14 years. The officer did not answer. Once they were outside, Luca asked, "Does that hurt us?" "Yes." Evelyn did not soften it. Naomi lost direct archive control. That removes one independent route. But the paper copy survives. For now, Luca's counsel approached from the curb with another problem. North Atlantic's lender counsel had delayed production of the acquisition draft. A new privilege objection claimed the archived file might contain protected financing strategy unrelated to the concession. "How long?" Evelyn asked. "They will seek a ruling tomorrow." Too late. Ratification was that night. Midnight would decide whether the agreement attached to the concession period. Luca's expression darkened. "So our decisive source disappears behind lawyers until after the deadline." "Not disappears," Evelyn said. "Becomes unavailable when we need it." Grant had adapted intelligently. He had not stolen the document or destroyed it. He had put procedure around it. Harder to attack, easier to defend later. "What about the concession monitor?" she asked. Luca's counsel shook her head. "They have a routing reference. Not the full draft. Then we authenticate the objective another way." Evelyn's shoulder still hurt when she reached across the hood of the car for her folio. She opened the financing side letter and read the emergency takeover language again. The hidden acquisition clause has to appear somewhere outside North Atlantic's privileged room. A lender does not fund an emergency takeover right. It has never been shown. "Loan conditions," Luca's counsel said. Evelyn nodded. "Or a risk memorandum. Something created independently by the bank," Luca said. "Can we get it today?" "Maybe not voluntarily." "Then what?" "We make Grant use the mechanism in public." Later that morning, Pier 14 Operations reported the first hazardous cargo discrepancy. 3 refrigerated containers had been flagged by the inspection team for undeclared lithium battery components. The electronic manifests showed clean agricultural loads. The inspection copies showed batteries listed under a secondary commodity field added only that morning. Luca's operations chief said the containers had not moved since the previous evening. "Who controls the manifest amendment field?" Evelyn asked over speakerphone. "Terminal compliance can add a safety notation. Carrier agent can also submit corrections." "Was the physical container seal broken?" "No." "Temperature logs?" "Normal." "Any battery density reading or thermal alert?" "None." Evelyn looked at Luca. "Paperwork first. Physical condition second." The same method again. Official record before reality. Do not open the containers unless ordinary hazardous protocol requires it. She told the operations chief. Document the seal numbers with an independent witness. Photograph the refrigeration control readings. Preserve the carrier's original manifest from before 6/4/1. Luca added. "And nobody calls the inspection political." "Correct," Evelyn said. "We beat bad paperwork with better custody." Not accusation. Soon after, a second container was placed under safety hold. North Atlantic filed notice almost immediately that Pier 14 might satisfy the disruption condition in the financing agreement. Too fast, Luca said. Evelyn looked at the filing timestamp. The inspection had not yet issued a formal suspension. North Atlantic had acted as though it already knew where the process would land. That is useful. They are trying to take my terminal, and they just showed anticipation. She copied the timestamp. Not conviction, but anticipation. At noon, the Union Council met to decide whether to proceed with the evening ratification. Half the delegates wanted postponement until the hazardous issue cleared. The other half argued postponement would trigger the very financing mechanism they feared. Evelyn was asked to speak for 4 minutes. She did not defend herself. She explained, only the contract consequence. If you postpone because someone created a safety question, you convert an unresolved question into documented labor instability. The financing clause does not care why you were afraid. It cares what you did because of it. One delegate asked whether Serrano Maritime had pressured her to say that. Evelyn looked directly at Luca across the room. No. Mr. Serrano suspended my access when evidence pointed toward me. He has not restored me as his attorney. I am here under union authorization. Luca's face gave nothing away. That was deliberate. Grant, seated 3 rows behind the North Atlantic observers, watched them both. Evelyn saw satisfaction in the way he leaned back. Good. Let him think the separation remained real. After the meeting, Luca caught up with her in the service corridor. You made me look colder than I am. You needed to look exactly as cold as Grant expects. And if he believes it, he keeps using the channel. Luca glanced toward the closed doors. You are asking a lot from appearances. Appearances are what framed me. He accepted that. By mid-afternoon, the inspection team issued a preliminary safety hold on 1 refrigeration lane. Not the whole terminal. That was not enough for North Atlantic's emergency takeover clause. Minutes later, a fire alarm activated in the adjacent hazardous screening bay. Workers evacuated. A forklift operator clipped a steel barrier during the exit. Luca, who had gone to the bay to observe from outside the controlled perimeter, helped pull the operator clear after the man stumbled against the barrier. A jagged edge cut across Luca's palm. The wound was shallow, but bled heavily. He wrapped it with a sterile compress from the first aid station and refused anything beyond basic treatment until the evacuation stabilized. Evelyn found him 10 minutes later, beside the first aid station. Show me. It is a cut. Show me anyway. He opened his hand. The wound was shallow, but blood had worked through the first compress. Evelyn took the antiseptic packet from the tray and cleaned the edge herself. Luca did not flinch. He watched her instead. When she wrapped the fresh bandage, his fingers closed once around hers, not trapping them, only answering the contact. Evelyn looked up. He released her immediately. You are terrible at pretending you don't care. He said, I care whether you bleed on a contract I spent 10 days saving. Cruel woman. Dangerous man. For 1 quiet second, neither of them moved. Then Evelyn tightened the final wrap and stepped back. Keep it clean before tonight. Yes. Counselor. His security director approached with worse news. The alarm had not originated from heat or smoke. It had been triggered by a manual pull station inside a corridor with restricted access. Camera footage from that corridor was unavailable for 6 minutes because a scheduled network maintenance event had been entered the night before. Who entered the maintenance event? Evelyn asked. Terminal Compliance Administrator. Veil his office. Luca looked ready to move. Evelyn stepped between him and the corridor. No. He triggered an evacuation. His office created the access condition. We still need the person above him. Someone could have been hurt, which is why we preserve it and keep him confident. Luca's injured hand flexed once. Pain crossed his face and vanished. How much confidence does he get to keep? Until he reaches for the acquisition. 2 hours before the ratification hearing. The trap finally reached Grant. North Atlantic circulated a supplemental financing notice that treated 8:30 as a real labor cutoff, the exact false deadline Evelyn had invented and sent only through Vale's channel. Worse for Grant. The document invoked a hidden acquisition schedule that would transfer emergency control of Pier 14 if labor instability and a safety shutdown happened together. Evelyn checked the upload history. The author field carried Grant Mercer's name. For the first time, his name sat on a document that joined the false deadline to the takeover mechanism. Luca leaned over the table. That is enough. Almost. Evelyn pointed to Grant's name. An author field can be faked. I want an independent source proving the acquisition schedule exists. Luca's counsel's phone rang before anyone could answer. She stepped away, listened, then returned with a different expression. The lender's compliance desk confirms the hidden takeover plan is in its credit risk file. It was created weeks before the gala, and it grants conditional transfer rights over Pier 14 if the labor deal fails during a qualifying safety shutdown. Evelyn looked at Luca. There it was, in plain language. Grant's document carried the false deadline only Vale had received. An independent lender proved the takeover plan had existed before Evelyn was accused. Objective. Knowledge. Mechanism. Now we make him defend it in public, she said. That evening, the ballroom inside the Port Authority Exchange began filling with union delegates, lenders, corporate counsel, observer, and press. Grant entered through the east doors with North Atlantic's team. Evelyn entered through the west with Naomi, who no longer controlled the archive, but still carried her personal notebook and a certified copy of the union authorization. Luca arrived separately. He did not look at Evelyn. That was also part of the plan, 15 minutes before opening statements. Port security approached Evelyn with an administrative notice. Her access to the presentation floor had been challenged based on the unresolved ethics complaint. Grant watched from across the room. Who filed the challenge? Evelyn asked. The officer checked. North Atlantic Council. Specific basis. Potential contamination of pending evidence. Evelyn looked toward Grant. He had adapted again. If he could not stop the event, he would remove the person who understood the trap. Luca remained where he was. He did not intervene. Several delegates noticed. Grant smiled. Evelyn accepted the notice, read the appeal provision, and found the clause she had expected, because she had drafted the hearing rules herself 2 years earlier. This restriction applies to party counsel. She said, I am not appearing as Serrano counsel. She handed over Naomi's authorization. I am appearing as union-designated contract integrity counsel. Different authority. The officer read it. Grant's smile disappeared. Then every light in the east half of the hall flickered once. A port official hurried toward the podium with a new message from Pier 14. The preliminary safety hold had just been expanded to the entire terminal after inspectors received an authenticated hazardous material certification showing undeclared batteries across 6 container groups. North Atlantic filed its emergency takeover notice. 60 seconds later, Evelyn checked the certification number. It matched none of the original carrier records. Grant had stopped waiting for the vote. He had triggered the contingency early. And midnight was now less than 5 hours away. The full safety shutdown reached every screen in the Port Authority exchange before the hearing began. 6 refrigerated container groups were suddenly listed as carrying undeclared batteries. Pier 14 was closed, and North Atlantic had filed for emergency control almost immediately. Evelyn looked at the wall clock. Midnight was less than 5 hours away. Grant stood beside North Atlantic's attorneys with the calm expression of a man who believed the paperwork had already won for him. Do not attack the shutdown first, Evelyn told Naomi. If we sound desperate, they call us reckless. We build the chain and let the safety record collapse under its own weight. Luca approached only far enough to speak without making it look as though Evelyn had returned to his legal team. His bandaged hand hung at his side. All 6 containers are still sealed, he said. The original carrier records are preserved. Good. Then nobody gets to invent what was inside them after the fact. A lender compliance officer joined them with 2 sealed folders. She confirmed the point Evelyn needed most. North Atlantic's hidden takeover plan had existed weeks before Grant accused Evelyn of leaking anything. If the labor deal failed during a qualifying safety shutdown, North Atlantic could step in and seize emergency control of Pier 14. Evelyn looked at Luca. That means my accusation did not create their plan. It was part of the plan. Exactly. The hearing chair called the room to order. Union delegates settled into their seats. Reporters raised cameras. Grant stayed at North Atlantic's table, as if he had been waiting all week for this moment. Evelyn walked to the union presentation desk with Naomi beside her. The room was different from the gala, but the humiliation was the same kind: public, polished, and designed to make her look guilty before anyone understood the evidence. This time, she owned the microphone. The delegates have been told the vote should be postponed because Pier 14 is unsafe. She began. Before you let that shut down, decide your contract. You need to know whether the records supporting it are real. North Atlantic's lead lawyer stood. Ms. Hart remains under an unresolved ethics complaint. Her presentation is conflicted. Evelyn held up the union authorization. My own conduct is part of the evidence. I am not asking anyone to trust me. I am asking you to follow records that can be checked without me. She placed the restricted contract draft on the screen. This is the document, Grant said. I leaked. My office never received it. Grant's lawyer immediately objected. Electronic files can be deleted. Yes, Evelyn said. That is why I did not rely on one computer. She showed the union distribution record and her firm's independent intake mirror. Then she held up one of her old handwritten sheets for 11 years. Every bargaining draft that reached my desk got the same boring treatment. Date. Intake mark. Cross-reference. Every legitimate draft in this case has it. The document Grant blamed on me does not. Grant finally rose. A missing pen mark is not evidence. Evelyn looked at him. You used to call this habit obsessive. His mouth tightened. You told me nobody cared about my little filing rituals. She continued. You were wrong. A few heads turned toward Grant. One of the cameras shifted closer. Evelyn moved to the second contradiction. The port system also claimed my credential was inside the restricted archive before I arrived at Pier 14. She displayed the independent exterior record, showing her car entering nearly half an hour later. Grant spread his hands. Then perhaps she gave someone else her access. Possible, Evelyn said. That answer caught him. His face changed for the first time, so we checked who restored that access. She placed the identity vendor's preservation record on the screen. Her old marital credential had been reactivated through Martin Vale's compliance office using North Atlantic authorization. This does not prove Grant ordered it, Evelyn said. It proves North Atlantic had the means to impersonate me. Grant leaned back as if that distinction helped him. Evelyn let him. Then she held up the yellow legal page Naomi had sealed 3 days earlier. This is the simplest piece of evidence in the room. I invented one false rule. I told Martin Vale that the union had to certify by 8:30 or the vote would fail. The hearing chair looked at her. Was that rule real? No. Midnight was the only deadline. 8:30 existed nowhere except the message we sent to Vale. Evelyn changed the screen. A North Atlantic financing notice appeared. It treated 8:30 as a real cutoff. Grant's face lost color. This document was created after Vale received my false deadline. Evelyn said, it also invoked North Atlantic's hidden takeover plan. Grant stood again, too quickly this time. His chair scraped backward. Compliance teams brief transaction lawyers constantly. Then show us the legitimate briefing that gave you 8:30. His attorney whispered something to him. Grant ignored her. The information could have come from anywhere. No, Evelyn said. That is why I invented it. A bead of sweat appeared at his temple. He wiped it with the side of one finger. Then seemed to realize the camera had caught him doing it. His hand dropped. The lender officer testified next. Her bank's independent records proved the takeover plan existed before Evelyn's accusation, and that North Atlantic Transaction Council had submitted it. Grant's own financing notice tied the false deadline to that takeover mechanism. Grant reached for his water and knocked the corner of a legal pad instead. Several pages slid to the floor. Nobody moved to pick them up. His attorney bent toward him. Sit down. He did not. This is clerical garbage, he said. She is building a conspiracy out of filing habits and paperwork. Evelyn looked at the pages scattered by his shoes. No, I am showing where your story had to touch the real world. She turned to the safety shutdown. The original carrier manifests showed agricultural cargo. The terminal intake records matched them. Customs filings matched them. Refrigeration logs showed no heat event. Every physical container seal remained intact. The battery classification appeared only after a new compliance notation was inserted that morning. The hearing chair asked, what physical evidence established batteries were inside? The port safety engineer answered, none. Before the certification was issued. The room changed. Grant's confidence did not disappear all at once. It leaked out of him in pieces. His shoulders drew inward. The skin above his collar turned wet. He loosened his tie with 2 fingers. Then stopped when he noticed Evelyn watching him. He looked toward the North Atlantic executives behind him. One of them would not meet his eyes. Evelyn put the paper maintenance ledger on the screen. The same compliance office that restored my old credential also created the archive purge, the camera blind spot, and the safety changes that turned ordinary cargo into a shutdown on paper. Grant's voice came out sharper. That proves Vale acted improperly. Not me. Correct. For half a second, relief crossed his face. Then Evelyn displayed his financing notice again. The false 8:30 deadline traveled from Vale's channel into a document carrying your name. The independent lender proves the takeover plan was already waiting. If you received that false deadline innocently, identify the legitimate route. Grant looked toward his lawyer. She said nothing. Grant, the hearing chair, asked, privilege. Evelyn's voice stayed level. You used that information to trigger an attempt to take control of Pier 14. You do not get to rely on it in public and hide how you got it when the source becomes inconvenient. Grant opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The silence did what shouting could not. Evelyn watched the man who had spent years treating her precision as a personality flaw, realize that the small, dull habits he mocked had boxed him into a corner. The handwritten intake marks, the paper archive, the sealed copies, the false deadline, simple enough to remember without a spreadsheet. He had built his plan around the assumption that nobody would care about those details. Now an entire room cared. The hearing chair suspended North Atlantic's emergency takeover request pending investigation. Grant slammed one palm against the table. You are risking this port to protect her. Luca moved for the first time. He did not take Evelyn's microphone. He did not explain her evidence. He simply stepped beside her, close enough that Grant had to look at both of them. She protected herself. Luca said. Grant's breathing turned shallow. Luca's voice stayed quiet. You used her name because you thought she was easier to destroy than the deal you wanted. You used her mother because you thought fear would finish what the paperwork started. Grant glanced toward the cameras. Luca took one more step. Reach for her family again. And you do not get a second warning. Nothing in his tone sounded theatrical. Two North Atlantic executives moved away from Grant without discussing it. Evelyn touched Luca's sleeve. That was all. He stopped. His attention shifted to her immediately. And he stepped back because she asked him to, without a word. Grant saw it. So did everyone else. Before the chair could resume the hearing, the east doors opened, and a port official hurried inside. Pier 14's automated fire system had triggered a full yard evacuation. If the terminal remained legally closed past midnight, North Atlantic could still argue the shutdown conditions survived, even if the battery evidence failed. Luca turned toward his operations chief. Evelyn caught his wrist. The fallback. He looked at her. She had required it days earlier, because every attack in the case had depended on a system someone could alter from a keyboard. The terminal now had paper fire zone maps and mechanical status checks outside the compromised network. Evacuate everyone first, Evelyn said. Then verify the zones manually. No shortcuts. Luca repeated her order exactly. Workers cleared the terminal. Two certified safety supervisors checked the physical panels from protected exterior points. No smoke. No heat trigger. No sprinkler flow. The only event was a remote command routed through the same compromised compliance channel. The port safety engineer documented it. Under the terminal's established false alarm procedure, the automated shutdown was cancelled without Luca overruling a single safety officer. Grant sank into his chair. His tie had gone crooked. Sweat darkened the edge of his collar. The papers he had dropped still lay at his feet. When the hearing chair told North Atlantic its takeover request would remain frozen, Grant looked toward the company executives one more time. This time, one of them closed the folder in front of his empty place at their table. The union vote proceeded, well before 11. The agreement ratified. Luca signed minutes later. Evelyn stood beside Naomi while the certification was entered into the paper ledger and the independent electronic system at the same time. Grant had arrived, believing he could turn Evelyn's profession into the reason nobody trusted her. Instead, the work he considered boring had destroyed the only version of the story that could save him. Midnight no longer belonged to Grant. By the following afternoon, Pier 14 was operating under temporary independent compliance supervision. North Atlantic's emergency takeover notice had been withdrawn by its lenders. Not because anyone had suddenly become charitable, but because the hidden takeover plan could no longer be triggered without exposing the manipulated safety record beneath it. Martin Vale was placed on administrative leave while outside forensic counsel preserved his systems. Grant's firm removed him from the transaction pending a professional responsibility investigation. The Port Authority referred the credential restoration, false, hazardous certification, and manipulated access logs to the regulators that already had jurisdiction over the terminal. No sirens arrived to make the ending simple. Lawyers, auditors, lenders, union officers, safety engineers, and investigators took custody of different pieces because that was how evidence survived powerful people. Evelyn spent most of the morning giving statements. She corrected every interviewer who called her vindicated by Luca Serrano. "The records vindicated me," she said. Mr. Serrano eventually agreed to let them. At 3, the union reconvened in the same Port Authority Exchange ballroom to certify the ratification record. The press returned. So did donors and corporate attorneys who had watched Grant accuse Evelyn at the gala 10 days earlier. Luca stood at the podium before certification began. Evelyn had not asked him to speak. She almost objected until he opened with her name. 10 days ago. Serrano Maritime suspended Evelyn Hart's access while an accusation against her was still being tested. That decision was mine. No explanation followed. No mention of misleading evidence. No attempt to make his error smaller. I acted before the contradictions had been fully examined. My decision increased the professional damage already being done to her. He turned toward the union delegates. Serrano Maritime is withdrawing every internal notice that described Ms. Hart as compromised. We are sending written corrections to every party that received those notices. We will reimburse the union and Hart Labor Council for independent forensic costs created by our suspension, without requiring confidentiality. Evelyn had expected a correction. She had not expected the next part. Luca placed another document on the podium. Serrano Maritime is also surrendering the preferential concession credit created by North Atlantic's failed emergency process. Pier 14's next operating review will proceed under the ordinary competitive terms. His general counsel looked as though she had argued with him about that decision for hours. Evelyn understood the cost. He could have used Grant's failed scheme to strengthen Serrano control. Instead, he removed the advantage because it had been created inside a corrupted process. That was restitution, not romance. Luca stepped away from the microphone and faced Evelyn in front of the same kind of crowd that had watched her reputation collapse. "I am sorry." Nothing followed the sentence. No explanation. Evelyn held his gaze. "Thank you." That was all she gave him there. It was enough. Naomi certified the final union record at 326. Evelyn signed as Contract Integrity Counsel. Her name appeared exactly once, beneath her own authority. Not Luca's. Over the next 3 weeks, her clients returned in stages. 2 apologized. 1 did not, and was replaced by a new union local that had watched the hearing. Hart Labor Council restored her full systems access after outside forensic counsel completed its report. The managing partner offered to issue a statement saying the firm had always believed in her. Evelyn removed that sentence before publication. "You froze my access because the evidence justified preservation," she told him. "Say that. Then say the evidence cleared me." He did. Grant's professional problems deepened when independent investigators connected his North Atlantic transaction credentials to the hidden acquisition plan and the false 8:30 deadline. Vale's administrator log supplied the means. The Lendermira supplied the transaction record. The Union and Customs copies supplied the independent contradiction. Grant continued denying that he had directed the false safety events. Evelyn never needed him to say otherwise. Intent was built from timing, controlled information, the acquisition mechanism, and repeated acts that benefited the same transaction. Her mother returned to her original assisted living wing after the facility completed its own security review. Evelyn visited on a Sunday afternoon, carrying groceries and a stack of printed photographs from the union ceremony. Her mother examined the one showing Evelyn at the podium. "That dress was beautiful," she said. Evelyn laughed. "You skipped the entire legal victory. I raised a lawyer. I assumed there would be paperwork." The burgundy gown had been cleaned and returned to Evelyn's closet. She did not hide it. She also did not turn the kiss attached to it into destiny. Luca waited almost a month before asking to see her somewhere unrelated to contracts. Hearings, threats, or evidence. He asked by text. Dinner, public place. Your choice. Evelyn stared at the message for 10 seconds before answering with the name of a quiet Italian restaurant that belonged to neither Serrano nor any company connected to him. He arrived early. No bodyguards sat at the next table. One security car remained across the street because Evelyn had agreed that his life made zero protection unrealistic. He stood when she approached but did not touch her. "You look good," he said. Evelyn wore dark trousers, a cream blouse, and the same reading glasses she had once used to dismantle Grant's complaint. Careful. Compliments can create discoverable expectations. Luca pulled out the chair. "Then I withdraw nothing." She sat. Dinner lasted 90 minutes before either of them mentioned the gala kiss. Luca finally touched the faint scar on his palm with his thumb. "Was that actually your best idea that night?" "No." "What was the best idea?" Taking the complaint out of Grant's hand. The kiss was second, maybe fourth. Luca looked offended. Evelyn smiled. It was the first time she had done so around him, without calculating who might photograph it. He became serious again. "What are your terms?" She appreciated that, he asked, before offering his own. "My practice stays mine. My clients are not Serrano assets. You do not investigate people in my life because you feel uncomfortable. If there is a safety threat, you tell me what you know, unless disclosure would put someone else in immediate danger. Protection is discussed, not imposed." Luca nodded once after each point. "And if I disagree, you can disagree. You cannot punish me for saying no." "Agreed. Your turn." He considered it. "If you know a threat directly involves me, you do not decide alone that I am safer without the information." Evelyn thought about the records room and the weeks when she had tried to carry every risk through procedure. "Fair. And if you kiss me again, I would prefer advance notice." "That sounds unreasonable. I survived the first one." "Barely." He smiled. "Then." And there was no ballroom crowd to interpret it for them. Months later, when the next port agreement came across Evelyn's desk, Serrano Maritime was only one party among several. Luca's company did not receive special treatment. Evelyn marked the draft with her intake code, wrote the date beneath it, and found an authority clause she disliked. She called opposing counsel and demanded a revision. Luca happened to be standing outside her office when she finished. He did not enter until she waved him in. That small pause mattered more to her than the armed guards. The ballroom, or the kiss that had started everything. He had learned where her authority began. Evelyn closed the file, stood, and walked toward him because she chose to. This time, when she kissed Luca Serrano, nobody was chasing her. Nobody was filming, and nobody could mistake the decision for evidence against her. If Evelyn's fight to reclaim her name and choose love on her own terms stayed with you, subscribe, like this story, and tell me in the comments which moment hit you the hardest. Share it with someone who loves mature mafia romance. And come back for the next story.